without caffeine? Or?
Yeah, it's some mint tea.
Yeah, mint tea. Alright then. Let's see here.
So you got some ideas you want to share?
Definitely some ideas. What have the format of your past conversations been like? I'm just curious.
They're formatless.
Formatless?
That's why I call it conversations. It's just like two friends sit down. We're gonna talk politics.
Okay. I suppose a good spot to start is you used to work at Starbucks, right?
Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
Oh gosh, 20.
About 20
It was
years
my high
ago?
school job. It was
Your high school job?
Yeah.
And what was the general atmosphere and vibe of the place like then?
This is interesting. I haven't thought about this in a lot of years, but when I started working at Starbucks, do you remember when Starbucks was actually cool? Like everybody was all about it. When it first started blowing up.
Oh yeah, I remember back in Eugene, there was a campus Starbucks there. They had live music and everything.
You know what I'm saying? So it started in the time where there was a lot of momentum, and Starbucks was a company that was known for taking really good care of their employees.
How good a care was it back then, as far as pay and benefits and all that?
I was in high school, so anything would have been good for me. It's hard for me to compare, but I remember it was, I don't know, after tips you could make $15 an hour, which in 2005 or something was good money.
That was a lot of money for a barista in those days,
Yeah.
when the minimum wage was less than half that.
Yeah. It was like $7 or $8. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. And, of course, and I've kind of noticed that Starbucks has been changing to a lot of those drive-through formats, and it just seems to be like the company's appeal and its business model is getting kind of lowest common denominator, kind of dumbed down.
That's what happens when you go like that big.
When you get that big, kind of like the, kind of almost like an aging dinosaur of sorts.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was really moved by what's been happening the last several months at Starbucks with this union organizing effort.
I don't know anything about this.
You don't know anything about it? Okay. Well, it started in Buffalo, New York, and I think that was, don't quote me on this, but I think it was October or November last year.
Okay.
And the first store voted to form a union. And then since then, it's expanded to at least 100, somewhere between 100 and 200, because it happens so fast that it's hard to keep track of the numbers at any one point. But there's well over 100 stores that have filed for union elections. At least 10 have actually won their election. Only one store has turned it down so far. I went to a rally here in Portland about a week ago that was a solidarity rally because there were several stores that were aiming to unionize. I got to talk to one of the baristas who got fired in retaliation for it.
Oh.
And I've seen some of the horror stories of Starbucks workers and some of the various just the kind of childish tactics that management has used to try to intimidate people from forming a union. And the same thing's going on, of course, at Amazon as well. But it's been really eye-opening to see that, because obviously at this point, corporate America is scared. They sense this momentum growing for workers' representation in every sort of thing, and they've become so used to management having all the power in its hands that they are desperate to try and stop that power from shifting, I guess is the big thing. Now, a little thing about me, my background, I graduated with a degree in economics back in 2009.
Cool.
And that was right at the start of the Great Recession, so I've had real trouble, getting my career going solid. I mean, I am in a union grocery job now, and I make about $20 an hour. Still, I had several years where I was really, really, really struggling. I was a part of the whole Fight for 15 movement several years ago.
I don't know about that.
That was back in 2014, 2015. It started...
Oh, for the minimum wage.
Right.
Okay.
It started with fast food workers that were striking in New York City. And then it spread to various cities. Seattle was the first city to pass a $15 minimum wage. And once that happened, I realized, okay, this is a chance, one of those like one in a century chances where we have an opportunity to make a pushback. Kind of like what happened in the 1930s and 1940s when workers got better organized and their actions led to a much more prosperous America after the war.
Yeah.
So I was a part of the movement to gather petitions, write articles in the local paper. I even did a couple news interviews. So I must have devoted at least 100, 200 hours of unpaid time in the hopes that by doing that, many thousands of people would be able to benefit.
Yeah.
We did get a wage increase passed. It was not 15, and it was pushed out over 6 years, which means that inflation is going to erode some of the gains at the end of the day, especially now.
All of the gains by now.
Well, that's the thing. When you push it out for several years, and now in the last couple years of the raise, now we're getting this burst of inflation. And let's just say I'm hoping that there's some additional movement to raise it further now, because we definitely need it.
So, I have a question. I just wonder what your thoughts are on this, because this is just what's coming to mind for me, is where does it all stop? Because inflation kind of continues forever, you know? I mean, you know what I mean? It's a parabola, and we continue raising the wages, and they continue to print more money, and then the prices of everything goes up, but like wages aren't raising at the same rate as inflation, you know what I mean? Like stuff that would cost $1 in the 40s, you know what I mean? That was like $20 today or whatever, you know?
Exactly.
But our raise, even though people are making more money today, they're not making exponentially that much more money, you know what I'm saying? So I don't just, where does it all end?
Okay. Well, the important thing to remember is that back in the 40s and the 50s, when we had powerful unions in this country and they were able to push for big minimum wage increases, those wages did go up faster than inflation. So average working people were getting ahead. Living standards were improving. That started to change in the 70s and 80s. And that's when if you go back and look at a graph of the minimum wage, it was raised like almost every other year back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And then starting in the 80s, that's about the time that, at least at the federal level, that Congress got chintzy and started sitting on it and letting inflation slowly erode the purchasing power of the wage.
Yeah.
Now, where we're at now is, the good news is a lot of the newer inflationary or the newer wage proposals that have come up in the last couple decades, they include an annual inflation adjustment. That happened in Oregon 20 years ago. It was a small increase, just like 50 cents on the ballot, plus additional annual inflation adjustments after that. So that can protect the wage from eroding over time. And nearly all of the new wage proposals that have come by in the last decade at least have that inflation adjuster attached to it. That's one thing. As for what's causing the inflation right now, really it's kind of just the post-COVID bit of getting back to normal. It takes a while for the economy to fully reopen, and it takes a time for our global supplies to really kick back into gear. And while that's been happening, supplies have been in short run, and that can drive up the price on various goods. There's always the possibility that once you get inflation up to a certain level, that people start expecting inflation to continue, and so they start adjusting their expectations in terms of shopping habits and also wage demands as well. particularly unions that have contracts are like, oh, inflation's 7%, that means in order to get ahead we need to demand a 9% raise. That can lead to a situation, if it goes on long enough, where inflation kind of gets locked into the dynamics of the economy, and at that point it does get to be a little more difficult to bring it back down.
Well, that's because like kind of what I was saying before is just the fact that the Fed continues to print money, doesn't that constantly devalue the dollar?
Well, and the thing is that for a while the Fed was trying too hard to solve a problem that it isn't really geared up to solve. This was after the Great Recession, when investment was way down and you had a bunch of excess private money that was floating around and didn't have anywhere to go. And the Fed thought that it could fill the gap by making interest rates really low,
So people buy shit.
by pumping more money out through quantitative easing, and the thought that it would somehow bring the economy back. Well, it definitely helped the stock market, but it wasn't the kind of policy change that would have really made a difference for working people as far as getting people back to work, getting their paychecks bigger so that they can afford to do their life, some of their ambitions in life, and not be totally strapped all the time.
Yeah.
But as for one of the things that I'm really frustrated with is how just how blind and how tone deaf our political discussion has been over the last couple decades about all of this. It's like the working class continues to suffer. The top, the elite corporate billionaire few continue to pile it up, and the discussion of politics it wants to focus on every issue except the elephant in the room. And we've gotten to the point now where it seems like in its desperate effort to stop talking about the real issue, it's made the rest of politics just so dumbed down and silly. You've got one party in this country that is basically gone completely to conspiracies and total disinformation. The other party is trying to fill the gap by talking about, hey, we believe in diversity, we believe in inclusion, we believe in social justice within the framework of the same economics. So it's kind of like, you see all these corporations coming out against various bills about elections or about the don't say gay laws that have passed in certain states. And I think it's just kind of a ruse. We'll use the names now. The Democratic Party I'm talking about is trying to be the party of woke capitalism, if that makes sense to you.
Okay.
Bunch of corporate interests trying to appeal to a certain segment of the working population that happens to believe in inclusion, diversity, justice, and all that, saying, hey, look at us, we support LGBTQ causes, we believe Black Lives Matter, blah, 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 blah. But we still want to pay workers low wages.
Yeah.
We still want to make their work lives difficult by not hiring enough people.
We still got slaves making Nikes.
Yeah, and we still want to harass anyone who tries to organize a union. So that's falling on deaf ears, and I think it's no small surprise that Democrats are doing badly in the polls right now, because they're not really hitting the real issues. So you've got conspiracy theorists on one side, you've got kind of fake wokeness on the other, and then you've got these commentators that claim to be in the center, the sensible center in the middle, who reject both of the kind of extreme rhetoric that you get from those camps. But here's the thing. A lot of these centrist voices, they have an agenda of their own. They're protecting the status quo, big business, corporatism. So that's how you can get members of the Senate or the House who say that they're voting against
They're
bills.
like, we're centrist, but really they're trying to leave everything like it is.
Right. They represent the existing power elite. We don't want to change anything. We don't want to rock the boat because we're principled centrists. No, you're corrupt shills. That's all there is to it.
Yeah. Things got to change over time.
And I think the big thing that people are missing here is we're used to thinking of politics on a simple one-dimensional left, right, and something kind of wishy-washy in the center. But as columnist Jim Hightower once wrote, and he was based out of Texas,
I like Hightower.
politics is not left versus right, it's top versus bottom. Because what do most, and not all, what do most liberal voters and what do most conservative voters have in common?
Shoot.
Huh?
Go for it.
They work for a living. They show up, they're told by an employer, this is what you have to do for 4, 6, 8, 12 hours, whatever a day. We're going to call the shots. We're going to say, this is how much you're going to get paid for it. It's our terms, and you don't have independent wealth to fall back on, so you can kind of take it or leave it and starve.
Yeah.
And finally, that consciousness the last few years seems to be changing just a little bit. We see more and more workers quitting their jobs, looking for something new. We see others actually organizing unions. And I think, excuse me here, I had some things that I was running in, that would be an important shift in everything. Because if you look at the issues like raising the minimum wage, making college more affordable, providing trade school in addition to college, because not every job in this country is built, designed for 4-year degree training.
Absolutely.
There's vocational training and all that. There's massive bipartisan public support for taking real action on these issues. But Congress can't get its shit together. It's fighting over the old battles, okay, oh, Trump said this. Oh, look at that, all this cancel culture and wokeness on the other hand.
Yeah.
They're ignoring what really matters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And they're turning more people off, and even I am kind of sick of following it. So I am going to find kind of alternative outlets, like supporting local union drives if I see them coming up, going to organizations that are highly supportive of that, because I think the only way, with the country so divided and more people willing to justify ends with means, even if that means dismantling some of the pillars of our democracy because they have been kind of conditioned to hate the other side. Mm-hmm. How do you put that back together? You can't just say, oh, we should learn to sing Kumbaya and all that. It's not that simple.
Yeah.
If you want to save democracy, here's a better idea. Bring it to the workplace.
Okay.
Form unions. Require that the elites who run these companies actually listen to the people who are making their wealth for them.
Okay.
That will change the dynamic of our politics if we get it going strong enough, because now you have everyone in the workforce, regardless of whether they support Team Blue or Team Red, when they come in here to work, they're team workers. And that kind of a strategy proved to be a real winning strategy for several decades in this country, and it made a big difference.
Okay. I have ideas. I'm just going to take a little note here. Let you continue.
Let me see. I really covered most of it. One other thing I'm just curious about. Have you watched Game of Thrones?
No.
You have not. I didn't watch it for years back when it was on. I was thinking, it's just kind of a sensational medieval fantasy with a bunch of blood and a bunch of violence and a bunch of rape scenes. Then I began to realize it has its own very interesting and complicated politics of its own.
Absolutely.
It's not just, and what I love about it is it's not the usual left-right two-party mentality that we've become accustomed to in our modern world. Instead, you have many different houses, shall we say, all fighting for power. And there's even one great quote by the character who has the dragons in this show, Daenerys Targaryen, who says to her new hand, Tyrion, all these houses are just like spokes on a wheel. First one gets on top, then another gets on top, and the wheel keeps on spinning, crushing the peasants, the commoners on the ground. And Tyrion is not very idealistic, because he's kind of lived in that power structure for so many times. He says, well, a lot of people have dreamed in the past about stopping the wheel. It's a beautiful dream. Daenerys says, I don't want to stop the wheel. I want to break the wheel. And this bit about getting our politics beyond, the usual culture war fights, and actually finding issues where the vast majority of us have a common stake.
Yeah.
And I think this worker business is really where popular support lies. If you start making the conversation about that more and less about the old divisiveness, then that can really break the wheel of everything just going on, rather than, we have Bill Clinton, then we have George W. Bush, then we have Obama, then we have Trump, then we have Biden. Different spokes on the same wheel of corporatism and inequality, while the average working stiff continues to struggle day to day. So that's really where I'm aiming at right now. And I've got a busy life. I work a job. I'm going to the gym several days. I'm playing 2 instruments now, including a new double French horn I just got.
You got the double?
Well, it's on the way. It'll come later this week.
Sweet.
So my time for kind of top versus bottom political activism is going to be limited, but I kind of am beginning to realize what battles I want to pick.
That's great, man.
And what needs to be done is it's time to realign our spectrum of debate. Get away from the old tradition and love of country versus, justice, cultural liberation on every issue. How intersectional can you be? No, it's simple. Speak out for the interests of the many, not the few.
Yeah, feel it. You know about the Georgia Guidestones?
Huh?
You know about the Georgia Guidestones?
I have not heard of it.
Alright, let's go down conspiracy land real quick.
Okay.
So, I guess in Georgia, there's these pillars that were put up. I don't know who put them up. I'm sure there's a better story about that if you want to look it up. But on these pillars, I guess it says in multiple different languages. It's like kind of like some like New World Order stuff, or there's conspiracy around these things, But anyway, on there it talks about bringing the population down to be in balance with Earth, And I wonder sometimes that the elites don't want to get rid of us. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, the whole business of reduce the population by killing off the peasants.
Because it's like at a certain point the king needed all of us to work the land, but now that they got like AI's on its way and they got machines, shit's efficient. They don't need us.
Just kill off some of the slaves so we have more room to play.
Exactly.
Well, I see a certain echo of that in the whole billionaire space race. A lot of more billionaires thinking, Earth is so fucked up. Let's go out to space instead and leave the masses behind to deal with the pig shit that we left behind on the planet. And, well, obviously the first thing to understand about that problem is space is not an easy bug to conquer.
Yeah, for sure, yeah.
The logistics of actually living in space are incredibly costly, incredibly difficult. Minor mishaps can lead to catastrophe up there because you're in the middle of a vacuum.
You got nothing.
And then, and to think of the amount of resources that would be required to terraform another planet or another moon is prohibitive as well.
For sure.
So we've got this one planet. That's really all there is. You know, people can toy around with the idea of, oh, well, maybe we can move to other planets. It's not going to work, and do we have enough resources and enough potential with our system here to expand it out to other planets? I don't think so.
Well, it's like, dudes, if you guys couldn't even handle Earth is easy. You're gonna go out to Mars, this is gonna be a pain in the ass, you know?
Yeah, I mean, what are you thinking about that? How can you make another planet habitable when you've been spending the last few centuries making your first planet uninhabitable?
For sure.
It sounds just like the
ironic.
dictionary definition of insanity.
Yeah. I think, I mean, just on the point of space travel and all that, I guess, like, eventually if we develop to a certain place, it's gonna happen, but I don't think we should be leaning on it as a backup plan for Earth. You know what I'm saying? It's like, if you guys can do that on top of taking care of Earth, great.
Put it this way, I am all in favor hopefully in the next 100 years at least, of sending a human expedition to Mars. But not so that they can, you know, as a way that we can escape Earth because we've screwed it up. No, we could learn a few things about Mars and about some of the resources and minerals there that would help us improve our living and managing of Earth. That's it, period. It's not a matter of living on other planets, it's a matter of learning from them. Perhaps if we send a manned crew out to Mars, we can learn a little bit about its past climate, about whether or not it supported life in the past, what screwed up those conditions on Mars, and it would make us more aware of what we need to watch out for here on Earth, if anything.
I don't know how sweet the Earth is, or can be, you know. So I'm gonna ask you this question. Get back to top versus bottom economics in a second, but I gotta ask you too, what you think about aliens?
That's always a fun topic to bring up. I think that most, as far as I know, I think the military and other various explanations can explain nearly all the UFOs we've seen, because we have a highly intelligent technological development within our military industrial complex. We have for almost a century. And there's been a lot of examples of military technology that is really state of the art, and then a couple decades later it gets released to the public in like military surplus, and people are like, wow, this shit is good. And it was invented 30 years ago or something like that.
For sure.
So I think that military technology can explain a lot of what's been going on with UFO sightings and such. As far as extraterrestrial life, I think it would be a very, very huge surprise if it didn't exist somewhere else in the universe. I think it's
just so big.
It's so big, and there's so many planets out there that it doesn't make sense to think of the Earth as the one and only spot where everything got right.
That was when I watched the beginning of Cosmos, Carl Sagan, have you seen it?
I haven't.
They start maybe they start at the Earth and then they zoom out, or they start all the way out at the edge of the universe and zoom into Earth, or it's like one of the two. But when you see the scale, you're just
I've seen those scale videos in some of my old college physics or even high school physics class, where they explain the different scales between from an electron up to a human cell, to your backyard, to the planet, to the solar system, to the galaxy. Yeah, of course.
And when you're looking at the Milky Way, and that's just all those things you're seeing are the sun is the sun, all those lights, and then around the sun is a bunch of planets. It's just like my mind is just it's like there's just got to be no way we're the only thing, you know what I mean? There's just so much variation out there.
What I think the other thing to keep in mind is that even if we're not alone, it doesn't necessarily mean that any extraterrestrial life forms are anything like what we would imagine.
For sure.
For all we know, they might not replicate by means of DNA or nucleic acids the way we do. Life on Earth does.
Yeah.
Who knows if the life is organized into cellular units the same way ours is either. And the other thing to keep in mind is that it's very possible that intelligent life exists or existed or will exist in other star systems, but the time scale in terms of like the history of a planet versus the amount of time that an advanced civilization exists on that planet is pretty small.
I feel you.
So what you could end up having is there could have been highly advanced civilizations out there 150,000 years ago, but there wasn't on the Earth to observe and communicate with them.
Yeah.
And
or
like,
did we have the technology?
And like now we're starting to send messages out to space saying, here, we're Earth, we are Homo sapiens.
That might not be smart, yo.
It might not be smart, but at the same time, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be
like
either a
up.
blessing or a threat in a relevant time scale. You know, It might lead some other civilizations to come explore here 20,000 years from now.
Yeah. I got a little pin, like, you know, a button, you know, that's the little golden record, you know, that we sent out to space.
Right. Yeah, that was definitely a good. If you're gonna try and communicate with any other life forms out there, I think that doing it that way rather than being totally paranoid is probably the way to go. I mean, yes, it could be a dangerous risk. The only safer alternative though would be to remain silent. I mean, don't go screaming, you know, a threatening, intimidating message out through space. Make it look, this is who we are. And this is what our culture has and what life on our planet is like. And who knows? Maybe they come to say hi, maybe they come to attack in 50,000 years. I won't have to worry about that.
Okay, let's go back to this political question I have. Let me see if I can set this premise here real quick. I have these thoughts independent of having listened to a conservative pundit, but over the last 2 years, have found myself listening to more conservatives because out of just curiosity, you know, like everyone's like, fuck Trump, blah, 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 you know, it's like, I was like, or, you know, fuck so-and-so on the other side, you know, whoever they are, you know, and so I'm just like, out of curiosity, I just go listen, you know, and then a lot of the stuff they were saying was stuff that I already thought. And I kind of grew up in like a super liberal city, and I always was different. Like I'd be talking politics with people, and maybe the stuff they were saying wasn't really resonating with me, and I would kind of have my own independent thoughts about it. Maybe unpopular opinions to the people I was with, but then as I started listening to these conservatives, I was like, they're saying what I think. And not everything, you know, but so I've had this weird experience of, I mean, I grew up here, you know, I mean, looking back at my dreadlocks, you know, I'm obviously not like a conservative, you know, but...
Well, I feel a lot of the same frustrations and everything about that, particularly the last decade when liberal conversation has kind of gotten bogged down by this bit of calling people out for... Somebody's got to be a horrible racist bigot for saying some mildly tone-deaf substance, which sucks because if you start doing that, it's like the boy who cried wolf. You do that enough, and then it gives cover to the real wolves who are out there.
For sure. Well, we're there now, and I think the right is reveling in it. You know, to be real,
Exactly.
they're just using it as fuel and telling jokes.
But like, for example, I'm generally I don't see this so much as a liberal or conservative, but I generally support Second Amendment rights. I mean, sure, I would like to have some background checks and a few basic regulations like that, but I don't think that guns are evil. And if anything, I think a bigger problem is having one faction of society, particularly one really extremist faction, which is what's happening now, that owns the vast majority of all the guns.
Yeah.
That becomes kind of like an internalized rogue state of sorts. And the whole point of, if you believe some of their rhetoric, the thought is, okay, well, we need a well-armed populace to defend against tyranny. People never sought to think, well-armed means having all the different factions across society being familiar enough with guns so that no one extremist or tyrannical faction can rise up because it happens to have stockpiled all the guns.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I definitely, I'm with you on that. And I grew up super liberal. My dad hates guns.
And I have no experience with guns, but I would definitely like to.
Well, I'll take you out, man.
You'll take me out?
Yeah, it's
awesome.
Yeah.
Somebody who I can really feel comfortable chatting with about guns who's not a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, no, I've owned guns, since I could buy them. And yeah, but like you're saying about background checks and all that stuff, like responsible gun owners want that stuff too.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And the other thing too is I think there's a little bit of a propaganda in that whole thing because, truthfully, like I don't know where you can buy a gun without a background check. Even gun shows and stuff like that. Like you go to a gun show, you have to fill out a background check. Nobody's selling you a gun.
Well, and another thing is it could have been a state thing because there's federal law and there's state law.
Yeah.
And some state laws can be really draconian when it comes to individual gun ownership. California has gotten that way.
Yeah.
Washington State is definitely tougher than Oregon. Like I was talking to my roommate saying that like there's certain rules, like you can't keep you're not allowed to store your guns loaded. I think that's what she said, which makes no sense in a self-defense situation because you have to have your gun ready to go if you're threatened.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I need to get my gun out. Here, I need to put the bullets in, lock everything up. By that time, you're already dead.
Yeah. Anyway, so the reason why I was bringing up these conservatives is because I feel like it's a conservative perspective that I haven't heard liberals say this. I've only heard conservatives say this. But with the idea of workers, democracy, kind of being on equal playing field with the managers, I feel like it's not that I'm arguing against that or I don't want that because I obviously do. But I just wonder how it all plays out because I feel like what if the workers, sometimes there's too many cooks in the kitchen or something. What if the workers don't really know what to do with the business? That's why the manager's doing that shit.
Okay, well, there's a practical way to deal with that, I think. You don't necessarily have to have workers vote on every single business policy that comes up. I mean, in a democracy, we don't do that. We have what's called a representative democracy or a republic. We elect people who then have to spend their basically at least a part of our full-time jobs is to represent our interests. It doesn't always work out that way in practice, but that's the basic premise. And you could do the same thing with in the economic sector as well. You could have a company that's owned by its employees and in which employees vote on the board and some of the top manager positions so that they will actually govern and manage the company in our interests rather than the interests of a few wealthy shareholders.
Well, and so I kind of, where I come to approach this, and so that's kind of like the conservative perspective or whatever, but where I would come to approach this, I'm sorry, is that in your way?
No.
Okay.
I just want to make sure I wasn't getting in camera way.
Thanks. We'll be out of here pretty soon. Where I come to this is like, I'm what I call myself a naturalist, which is like, I think like, here we are, the species on the planet, and like, stuff's not always fair. We're just kind of working it out. You know what I mean? And we have ideas about things, but those ideas aren't necessarily, or laws about things, but it kind of doesn't matter. It's like what just happens is what matters, you know? And so I feel like also too, as a naturalist, I'm like, we don't have to participate in these big corporations. Like if you work at Walmart, nothing against that, but I'm saying if you work at Walmart, you're not getting paid enough, you're mistreated by your company, and then you're upset about it. I know there aren't a lot of options because of the corporate world we're in, but it's like, it's kind of a snake eating its own tail, because it's like, well, don't shop at Walmart, A, don't work for Walmart, B, if everybody stopped working for Walmart, what are they gonna do, you know, like, and at the same time, these same people will go shop at Walmart because it's cheaper, and you know, or shop at Amazon because it's cheaper. You know, it's like if you really believe that, you have to go to local mom and pop shops only. You know what I'm saying? So, and I know people are stuck in a bad situation because we just woke up here in this cycle already.
I guess my response to that would be. It's not necessary to put all your eggs in one basket strategically. You can I definitely support the idea of supporting more mom and pops whenever you can. When it comes to dollars spent at Walmart or Amazon, even there you can be strategic and say, I'll shop at them when they agree to a good union contract. If they play tough with their workers, though, then I'll do a customer boycott because they're not honoring their responsibility.
For sure.
That's how we won the big raises in the last two grocery contracts. You know, for decades, grocery workers here were getting raises anywhere from a dime a year to maybe 30 or 40 cents. And that started to change in 2019. That was the first contract that really started to shift the needle. What happened is there was a long push with the union outreaching to grocery shoppers and saying, look, our wages have fallen behind. It's time to catch up with the cost of living. It's time to get the lower paid departments like the deli, the Starbucks, the bakery, and the home department in Fred Meyer stores, get their wages caught up to the cashiers and the grocery floor. And so they put that proposal, and when the company continued to play hardball, the union could have just jumped right into a strike at that point, and they might have won, who knows, but they decided to call on shoppers, say, hey, we're doing a boycott, go shop at another store for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, however long it takes for management to bend the knee.
Yeah.
And they definitely bent the knee compared to what had come before that. I mean, I think cashiers, it was like the raises went up to 60 cents a year, and the lower paid departments got nearly $1 a year. So big improvements were made. And then we had the last round, which was last year. That was our first post-COVID negotiation. And now we had rhetoric about essential workers kind of at our back, and the company was still trying to pretend we were essential but act disposable when push came to shove. Mm-hmm. So that, and then the Great Resignation, just the fact that workers over the last couple years have had more leverage because of the way the economy has gotten, we were able to play our cards and won a super winning contract. So I think grocery, like cashiers in particular, got a contract where you're going to be able to make at Portland and Vancouver, at least, by the end of 2023, going into 2024, tenured cashiers at Fred Meyer will be getting about $22 to $23 an hour.
Should be, yeah.
Exactly. So it actually is bringing our pay scale to a point. Not only that, but small towns like the Dalles, where I grew up with. When I started working at the Dalles Fred Meyer, the top pay rate for the cashier department was $14 an hour. By the end of next year, it will be $21 an hour. So it's going to be to a point where people in small towns, or even in medium-sized cities that don't have a really strong economy and there aren't a lot of really high-paying jobs, they'll be able to tell their teenage sons and daughters, hey, get a job at the grocery store. In a few years, you'll be making respectable money, not enough to be, luxurious or everything, but you'll have your basic bases covered. You're not going to be one of these horror stories of the single parent who works 3 jobs and still can't pay the rent.
Yeah, I mean, that's how we grew up, Okay, let me just check this camera real quick.
Okay.
Make sure we're still recording. Yeah, looks good. Okay, so I got one more kind of thought on that, and this isn't, I'm not trying to say that I believe this, I've just heard this idea and wonder what your thoughts are on it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so take somebody like Elon Musk or Bill Gates or something. All the money in the world.
Right.
Some people are like this eat the rich kind of idea, populist uprising, the people, we take Elon Musk and we chop them up into little pieces and give everyone a piece. You know what I'm saying? I'm speaking metaphorically. And then everybody takes their piece, goes to the bar, and then Elon Musk is gone forever, and we don't have somebody creating, like, we lose a genius, or and it's not always like that the geniuses end up being rich, obviously, but like, again, kind of like, I don't know, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying like, and I'm not saying I really believe this, but I think about this, like, do we really want to take all those people's money?
Well, I was just thinking about this the other day, and about the question of how eating the rich, and let's just say it's not just a matter of how much money people have, but how they got it that matters to me. So if somebody who's a real genius, invents some life-changing device that really helps society, and they end up making 10, 20 million bucks off of it, fine, that's great. If somebody is making billions of dollars just because they happen to sit on top of a company and are able to make that money by people who get filthy rich on the backs of the working poor, that's what I really have a problem with.
And I also have a problem with that, but I question, looking through history, at populist uprisings and how bloody they've become.
Oh yeah.
And so I ask, like, who decides, right? So you're like, okay, we're gonna go through all the companies and pick and choose who's virtuous and who's not. Who makes that decision? Who gets to keep their money? Who doesn't?
I think just a general better principle to do that, and to avoid that kind of populist demagogue scenario, more is to realize it's not just a matter of electing a head of state who's going to claim to act on behalf of the little people's interests. The common folk have to kind of take matters into their own hands, and that's what unions are for. That's what cooperative enterprises are for. It empowers ordinary working people to make some of those decisions on their own and to have a say in their workplace, so that you don't have to have some powerful government trying to set things right on its own, and claiming to represent it when it's vulnerable to the same corruptions as whoever came before it.
Yeah. Well, and then they just claim to represent the people.
Oh yeah.
It's what I'm saying, like, who decides, and
oh yeah, and there's definitely some of that narrative in Game of Thrones, if you ever watch it, of leaders who claim that they're going to represent the interests of the common folk, and then they never really do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's messy, man. It's a fun conversation.
I'm gonna be painting out here, just so you know, if you guys don't.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're gonna be out of here in like 5 minutes.
No worries. I just, as long as you don't like mind paint smell. We're gonna give these good tables a nice finish.
So you'll have to forgive me, I haven't gotten a chance to open up that Lamb Chop CD and listen to, but I got to listen to several tracks that night at Brick House.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Good.
I really love your style of chill, kind of alternative lo-fi and all that. I really miss some of that boom bap sound that you had back in like 2017, 2018 on the joint, where it was like that classic like 90s New York hip hop beat,
Yeah.
but with like a laid back a laid-back jazzy instrumental on top of it. That's heaven to me.
You know, honestly, over the last couple years, I've had an evolution. And I just kind of got like bored because I just played so many beats that I started kind of getting into some weird territory. But yeah, I try and like not take it too far, and I try and make sure and like, you know, mix it in. But yeah, it's like the joint has evolved. It's kind of like a little psychedelic spaced out now.
Well, you know, and you can evolve it several times. What you can do is move it into that psychedelic space area, and then maybe once every month or so have a throwback episode.
For sure.
It's like
for sure.
the good old classic joint.
For sure.
So I'm just curious. You said you gave up coffee because of caffeine problems. How long ago was that?
It wasn't caffeine problems. It was just that I didn't even intentionally quit drinking coffee. I just realized that everybody needed it and I didn't, and was like, I love coffee. I love the taste and smell and everything in coffee, but just the fact that it was like one less like addiction to have. You know what I'm saying? Everyone's got their cigarettes and their beer and their coffee and their everything, and the fact that I just had control over this one, I was just like, and also too, like, I, you know, getting started in the day, like I don't have energy problems, you know, like everyone's like, I need my coffee. I'm like, it's because you're going through withdrawals, buddy, you know. So it's a drug. You know?
Would you like to taste this?
I'm good.
Sure.
I appreciate it, but yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned that you still really love the taste and the smell. It's like,
No, I love it. Black, just a nice thick black, a cup of French press, you know, some dark roast. Like,
you gotta drink it not for energy. You just have to have it once in a while for enjoyment.
Yeah, for sure. But it's just one of those things where I'm like, since my body doesn't crave it at all, I'm like, I don't even want to start. You know.
I think that's a little silly. I mean, sure, I do have some of that addiction, but for me, it's more of a love of the beverage itself.
Yeah.
And so I think I feel
I'm not
sorry.
like afraid to drink it.
I'm sorry. I feel almost sorry for you, given how much you love the taste and smell, that you're not indulging every once in a while.
Yeah, no, I could. It wouldn't kill me. But it better be decaf, because I'll probably get jacked up.
Decaf? There's your solution right there. Drink decaf.
But even decaf has a lot of caffeine in it.
A little bit.
Compared to like, I don't drink any caffeine ever.
Wow. Well, that amount will probably be better than having full calf, though.
For sure.
It would be a worthy compromise so you can enjoy the taste again. I would strongly. If you decide that to start drinking decaf, I would totally endorse you and cheer you on that.
Well, if I do, I'll hit you up and we can link up and have a cup.
Totally.
Well, man, thanks for sharing your ideas. I appreciate you.
Awesome, man. Let me know when you want to hang, when the weather gets a little bit better, if you want to show me a little bit about shooting, or just, we could even shoot hoops sometime.
Yeah, bro, yeah, you play ball?
Not very well. I never did growing up, but it's one of those things, kind of better late than never list that I started doing like a year or two ago.
Well, yeah, man, let's wrap